Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Following up from another video that we did, which you guys loved, today we're going to be doing another comparison video. However, instead of comparing individual IMSs, we're actually going to be comparing the IMSs found in one city. In this video, we're going to be comparing Rome, so La Sapienza versus Tor Vergata. Also, in this video, instead of having a clear winner, what we're going to do is I'm going to try to reason out loud what I would consider if I was making a decision, because really, I want you guys to come up with your own framework to try and decide what's best for you. Now, if this is your second video in the series, you can skip to this time frame because timestamp, because I just want to quickly go over some disclaimers. The most important thing that you have to consider is that my reasoning is not the ultimate reasoning, okay? Like when I think of what's best for me, that doesn't mean it's the only thing to consider. So when I obviously have a clear bias towards Rome and Sapienza, even though I try to keep it out, you have to realize that for me, it's because this is what I love and this is what I want. It doesn't mean that anything on the opposite side is incorrect. So please, please, please keep this in mind, because I don't want to get complaints being like, why do you always say big cities are better? Because I like big cities. And so, yes, I just wanted to get this quick disclaimer out of the way. If I prefer Sapienza, doesn't mean Sapienza is the best. Yes, but also no. But you get what I mean. So please take everything I say with a pinch of salt. I really want you guys to come up with your own framework. So I'm just going to think out loud of how I would make the decision if I was going to any of these universities. If you want to learn a bit more in detail about any of the universities mentioned, I really recommend that you check out the podcast. I just interviewed someone from Pavia and we talked about big town versus small town. So to learn more in detail about any of these universities, please check out our other videos. There's really so much value packed into them. Please check out the website. We really write a lot of in-depth articles that you won't find as videos. And in the podcast, you can get differing opinions that aren't just mine, who prefer a big city. So let's hop into La Sapienza versus Tor Vergata. Quick disclaimer, I go to La Sapienza, but I promise I'm going to try my best to remove my bias out of it and think about it a lot more objectively and what I would personally consider when trying to choose between these two universities. So let's start off with some quick comparisons, nothing to do with my opinions. La Sapienza is located in the center of Rome. It has multiple campuses, but as far as like the IMS course is concerned, 99% of your classes are going to be located right in the middle of Rome, with some located in Sant'Andrea, which is a little bit outside. It's a much bigger and better hospital, but Sapienza's in city center, whereas Tor Vergata is on the periphery of Rome, and it takes about, I would say, generously an hour. It takes about an hour to get to Tor Vergata. Now, I did a full campus tour of Tor Vergata, and in it, I actually measured how long it took me to get from city center to Tor Vergata. So if you're interested, I would recommend that you go and watch that video. Next, what I want to consider is kind of like the class sizes and the minimum scores. Class sizes are a little bit important to consider, because if you have a class size that's way too big, you might miss out on forming a personal relationship with your professors. If the class size is too small and you get really unlucky with your classmates, you might not get along, and this might be a little bit problematic. But you know, the opposite can happen, that you become like a really close-knit group. So I just think class size is kind of important in this consideration, but it's also important because if you're EU, you need to consider how long you're willing to wait for scrolling, and if you're non-EU, you have to kind of consider how much are you willing that the scores might get more competitive and there's going to be less seats, so it's going to make it more competitive. So this is why it's kind of important to consider the class size. When it comes to the minimum score, Sapienza was the most competitive non-EU last year. I'm really not that surprised. It's an amazing university with an amazing reputation. So when you consider if you're non-EU, the minimum score plays a huge difference into it. If you're EU, the minimum score makes a difference because you need to consider how long you're willing to wait for scrolling. And if you don't know what that means, then please go to the website, read these scrolling articles. It will save you a lot of heartache and headache and not understanding and being afraid if you're going to lose your spot after you do the IMAT. So you need to consider how long you're willing to wait. Like if you're not scoring that great, but you're pretty confident you'll get into a place, but you don't want to wait like 6 weeks to start because you're going to miss classes, then you kind of need to consider the minimum scores when making your first choice as well. So next, let's compare tuition fees. So both of them have a minimum of 156. I'm not going to be mentioning any kind of like grant or scholarships or other kind of fee reductions. We have a video on that, but it's because Sapienza and Tor Vergata both have the exact same, because they're both led by Lazio Disco. So I'm not going to talk about that. But when it comes to school fees, both have a minimum of 156. Sapienza has a flat fee of 1,000 euro. That's your maximum, whether you declare your income or not, if you're a non-Italian student. Now, in Tor Vergata's website, it says that it can cost up to 4,500 euro, depending on your family income and where you're from, but you can pay it in installments. But again, like if you just show that you're from lower income, they can reduce it all the way down to 156. So let's talk about the cost of living. Again, they're both in Rome. Rome is, I think, the third most expensive city in Italy. Its rent prices are also kind of crazy, but that's kind of the nice thing if you live around Tor Vergata. So living around Tor Vergata is going to bring that cost of living so much lower, because you're not going to be like paying crazy rent prices like you would in Rome. If you want to consider like more accommodation prices, I wrote a very like detailed article about finding housing in Rome that will have like prices and other things and neighborhoods and things like that. But in general, if you are living near Tor Vergata, as long as you're not staying in Campus X, you can find rent for a lot cheaper. Now, I want to make a full video on Campus X. They changed their name to like CX, I think now, or like Campus Exchange or something like that. But Campus X was the most mind-blowing place, like student dormitory I've ever been to. They had all of the amenities you can imagine, like gym, hangout places, arcades, pool tables, barbecue places, all included in your rent. That canteens, cafeterias, it was beautiful, it was amazing. So like when you consider cost of living, around Tor Vergata is going to be a lot cheaper unless you stay in the private dormitories, in which case it's going to be kind of like a flat fee that would be comparable to living inside the city of Rome. But when it brings on to our next point of what amenities are going to be available, it's going to be so advantageous if you're staying in Campus X. If you're not, again, staying outside in Tor Vergata, your amenities are going to be a lot more limited because it's on the periphery of Rome compared to being in center Rome. Again, you can travel to the center of Rome. Both of them are technically in Rome, but just like quick comparison, I guess, based on location and stuff. So now I'm going to move on to kind of my personal opinions on it. Please, again, take it with a pinch of salt. I'm obviously very biased, even though I'm trying not to be. That's still going to like come in a little bit, but I'm trying my best. So I'm going to start talking by a little bit about the positives and the negatives. First of all, Rome is an incredible city. It is beautiful. It is one of the most touristic cities in the world. Like every street that you walk on in like Centro Storico, which is the historical center, like could belong in a museum. It's absolutely beautiful, like statues, buildings, architecture, museums, everything. Rome is absolutely incredible. And you know, if you go to Sapienza, you're so closely connected to it. Around Sapienza is San Lorenzo, which is a interesting neighborhood, but it's a huge party neighborhood. Like you can go there any night and there's going to be hundreds of students partying. You know, like you're going to get super cheap drinks. You're going to get to meet so many people. And it's like just so central to partying. There are so many bars and so many clubs and so many, like the nightlife is absolutely wild around Sapienza. You're going to be well connected to everything. It has its own tram stops that serves like 10 buses. It has its own metro stop. So like you can live almost anywhere in the city and still get to university easily. You know, so these are kind of like the huge pluses to being in the center of Rome. So this is a huge positive. Another huge positive is that Sapienza is the biggest university in Europe. And so sometimes it makes you feel like a small number in the system that no one cares about. It's really hard to like get to the bottom of things, to organize things. Like even the professors are kind of a mess sometimes. Like I can admit that because of how big the university is, it does really just feel like you're lost in the system a lot of times. But you know, like I'm not to defend Sapienza, but they're literally trying to organize a city of students, 120,000 people. That's bigger than most towns and cities in in Italy, on a budget of less than 1,000 euro for most of those students. So that is a thing. But the nice thing about it being so huge is that you have so many opportunities and departments and research projects. Now, I did a whole video on kind of like practical experience in Italy and how you can increase it and what you can do. But because Sapienza is so big and it's like publishing so much research in a year, it is way more likely that you can find professors to shadow or projects that you're interested in, things like that. But also it's just really kind of cool. Like last year, the physics department won a Nobel Prize. I think the chemistry professor who teaches in IMS, the first year, their department got like nominated for one. And don't get me wrong, again, Nobel Prizes aren't the be all end all. It doesn't mean the reputation is good. It doesn't mean the quality of education is good. I just think that that's like a huge huge cool thing. Like, I love being able to say that I go to the biggest university in Europe. I don't know, I just think it's cool. Also, you're going to have so many more international students, obviously, because the international student quota is going to be higher. There's going to be more partnerships with other European universities for Erasmus. So I think these are huge pluses. But again, I know this is a really biased opinion to have. I'm not trying to say that, you know, this is the be all end all, this is what makes it the best. No. So now I kind of want to talk about the negatives. But again, please, like, when I share these cool things about my university, it's not to kind of convince you that it's better. I just really like sharing these things. But to talk about the negative, it hurts how expensive it is. Like, it literally hurts how expensive rent is. Like, when I went to Campus X and we took a tour of it, and I saw like the cost of living in a semi-decent apartment in the center of Rome where you can travel to university for that exact same cost, not even including your bills, you can live in a private dormitory that has barbecues, your room gets cleaned, you have gyms, you have canteens, like, for the same price. Like, it hurts how expensive it can be in Rome. Now, I'm not saying that like you have to be super rich to live here. Like, it is very, 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 very livable on a budget, but you really, I feel, have to sacrifice like a lot of comforts. So this is a huge negative in my opinion if you go to La Sapienza, unless you're willing to live like far away or share a room. I think it's really expensive compared to Tor Vergata. And again, the other negative is that, again, like, the university is so big that it feels disorganized sometimes. And I used to think this was a lot to do with Sapienza. I found out that it's like a general Italy thing, but I think it's like really multiplied when you consider just how many hundreds of thousands of students that they're trying to cater to. Like, how many emails they're receiving. Like, people will be like, oh, but the office didn't reply to me. Like, you know, the hello office. And I'm like, yeah, but like, did you also consider that we're 120,000 people? Like, you know, so you also have to realize that how big it is can also be a huge detriment, where you do feel kind of like a number in the system. That's, you know, like you can take it as a positive or a negative, and the cost really hurts in my opinion. Like, when I saw Campus X and I was like, wow, I could literally be paying what I pay for rent and it would include everything, you know, so that's also a thing to consider. I don't want you to take this though as being that you can't live in Rome on a budget. That's not true. I just think that, you know, when you consider it, it's a huge I don't know, it hurts. That's all I can say. When it comes to comparing the further away versus closer thing, Rome is incredibly chaotic. Like, you know, I just described all of these beautiful statues and museums and everything, but that's not going to be your day-to-day. Your day-to-day is going to be trying to survive biking to school. It's going to be trying to survive like 300 people on a bus that should only fit 100 people. You know, so you also have to consider this. Just because it's in the center of Rome doesn't mean that it's all like cobblestones and beautiful views. There is all of that, but you also have to consider that your day-to-day is going to sometimes be rough and chaotic. Like, I can kind of compare it to New York, where people are just tense all the time. Like, you want to stop someone and ask them a question, and sometimes they're going to be like, oh, I have no time, what are you doing? And sometimes they're going to be like super nice. So this is another thing you have to consider. Just because you're in city center doesn't mean your life is going to be magical and amazing, even though for me, I feel like it is magical or amazing. Like, I go to school every day on my bike in the sun and I'm like singing. I love it. But again, there are also times where I'm like, okay, I'm manifesting not dying on this traffic. So, you know, it's a bit of both. It keeps you on your toes, but this is also something to consider. Whereas Tor Vergata, it is so calm out there. It is beautiful. Like, I just feel like the air was fresher, you know? The campus is so much more spread out. There's so much more green. I honestly swear the sky was clearer. Like, it's so much more relaxed. Like, even, you know, when you get your bus there, it's so much less crowded. People aren't as tense. So this is another negative of being in the city center versus, you know, being outside in the calm and collective parts of Rome, where you're still easily connected to the cultural center if you need to by traveling. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I think I just kind of wanted to give like both sides of the coin. Again, like, I love seeing the statues, but I also love not dying in traffic. So like, you know, you win some, you lose some. Personally, I love it. Like, the high highs and low lows make me feel alive, but I realize that I'm also probably a little bit weird for this. So please also keep this in mind. Another thing to consider is that Rome being so touristic because of how beautiful it is means that there are certain seasons where, like, it's just going to be torture. Like, it's going to be torture. And I don't know, like especially around Easter time, you can't go anywhere near the Vatican because there's just so many tourists. Like you just want to go to a museum, you might have to like line up for an hour just because there are so many tourists incoming. So this is another thing to consider. Like the cost of living in one of the most beautiful cities in the world is that everyone thinks it's one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And so yeah, this is another thing to consider. It's chaotic, it's busy, there's going to be lots of tourists. So these are like huge negatives. Whereas when you're out in Tor Vergata, like you can still enjoy all of that and just travel in and enjoy it and go back, and you're kind of out of that chaos. So that is also another thing to consider. All in all, I think let's do a recap on which side you should lean on. If you want like super busy, super metropolitan, you lean towards Sapienza. If you want less cramped, more fresh air, like more calm, open places, then lean towards Tor Vergata. If you want kind of like cheaper living without compromising quality, lean towards Tor Vergata. If you would rather be close to the action in the center of the chaos and you're willing to budget more, then lean towards Sapienza. If you want something less competitive, you're not really scoring great, but you still want to be in Rome, lean towards Tor Vergata. Whereas if you're ready to take on the competition, you're willing to fight for your space, as bad as it sounds, then lean towards Sapienza. So I think this video was a little bit of a mess. I really hope that I covered enough and gave you guys a better like consideration process. Me personally, I would still pick Sapienza. I have no regrets, but again, I know that that's a very biased thing to say. I don't want to influence your guys' decision. That's just my personal opinion, but I really hope that this gave you a better framework to understand. If you want to see things about these universities more in detail, I would recommend you to check out the interviews or the campus tours, or also check out the podcast, because we're going to be having a lot of different students and professors from both of the universities, hopefully over the next few months. And yeah, I hope that helped.